probably heard the concept of toxic masculinity that is used in academic and media discussions of masculinity. This kind of masculinity referred to certain cultural norms that are associated with harm to society and to men themselves. Being vulnerable, opening up about our emotions and feelings, let alone opening up about our mental illness, is terrifying, especially for some people who were told all their lives that boys don't cry, to grow some balls, and to man up. But little boys who are taught to take it like a man grow into men who fail to seek mental health treatment. I'm your host Raksh, and on this episode we're going to talk about these issues, and to do so I have Ashish with me today. Hi Ashish.
Hey,
So before we dive into this enormous, massive topic, tell us a little bit about yourself.
um, I'm a data scientist who lives in London. I'm a male. I'm brown. So yeah, I think I have a bit of experience with toxic masculinity.
Yeah, I was going to say that is why you're here today, because you have a little bit of experience. So for those who are wondering why Ashish, I feel like you're in a field as well that is very male dominated. Would you
Oh
say?
yeah,
Yeah, right?
engineering and just STEM in general.
Exactly. So we're just going to dive right into it. What do you feel like has been a big factor in creating a barrier between men and mental health?
Um, as men, you're kind of taught to bottle up all your feelings and not really feel things in the first place.
Mm,
At which point you don't know if there's anything up with your mental health because you're just told not to address this. You're not taught how to address this. Every time
mm,
you start to figure out how to address this as a little boy, um, you're not you're not given the opportunity to. Um,
mm.
so I think this is what the biggest barrier between men and mental health. It's the lack of feelings, the lack of understanding your feelings, and it's society telling you that you're not allowed to understand your feelings or feel anything that strong apart from obviously anger.
That's funny that you say that because, anger is the only emotion that is acceptable for men to feel, apparently. When a man is angry, it's totally acceptable. When he's crying, then, something's wrong. He shouldn't be crying. And when a woman is angry, then that's totally wrong because then she's a bitch or she's got issues. But when she cries, that's totally normal. I think, like you said, it's from the get go, from the very beginning. We say things like, boys don't cry, take it, like, man up, grow some balls. All these like sayings kind of do something to one's head and to someone, right? So I think those things that we, without thinking, are saying does something.
100%. It's definitely a subconscious effect as well as a conscious one.
Mm,
Um, yeah, it's interesting that you said that girls are expected to cry a lot as well, because I feel like with women, um, the only strong emotion you're allowed to feel is sadness, and with men, the only strong emotion you're allowed to feel is anger. It feels like that's what society kind of tells you. If a woman is exceedingly happy, overjoyed, people
yeah.
kind of look around and they're like, "Whoa, that's weird." But you see a
Mm,
woman crying on the train, and you're just like, yeah, that's normal. Yeah, I can see
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Something like that. And with a man as well, you see a man crying somewhere and you just something just kind of breaks in your head. This is not what you're used to seeing. So you're like, whoa, that's
Mm,
weird. You see a man shouting at someone down the phone on the street, you're like, yep, I can see that. And you
yeah.
just move.
Anger
So
is
I think
more
there's definitely a
acceptable.
subconscious thing as well.
Yeah, 100%. So, like you said, you are a brown boy. Um, obviously, you grew up in a brown household. So, how is it growing up in a brown household, and how has that affected your mental health?
Well, it actually took quite a long time for me to get even mildly in touch with my feelings and understand what was going through the emotional side of my head. Because as a kid, um, if I would fall over or get a little bruise or something, um, I would cry, and I used to cry a lot. So I'd go cry to my mom, and my dad would just sort of be there going, "Oh, when I was your age, and I used to get much worse cuts and stuff." Um,
Mm,
I wouldn't tell my mom or my dad. I wouldn't cry. I would just go to my room, and I would just deal with it, and it would just go away eventually. So there's no point in crying about it. And it was kind of this image that emotions are pointless for men to feel. and
Mhm.
women kind of feel it because they can't help it. That's the kind of society that I grew up in anyway, and I didn't really see any of my male role models, my uncles, my dad, my grandfathers. None of them really cried. I haven't ever seen any of them cry. I saw my dad cry
Mm.
once. His dad died, and I saw my uncles
Yeah.
cry when their dad died. So it's like only when extreme grief is there is it that you're allowed to see a man cry.
Yeah.
Apart from that, you're not. So growing up with that, I always felt that crying was bad, and every time I did, I would try to stop myself from feeling it rather than getting over it, feeling it, and then you know this kind of stuff. Um, so yeah, in that way, um, it was kind of hard for me as a kid to get in touch with my
Yeah.
emotions, and I had to do a lot of that heavy lifting as an adult, actively.
Yeah, and I think that's very important that you're saying that it is because it is your responsibility ability at the end of the day, and the fact that you took that when you became an adult, that is very important. Because your parents didn't allow you to express your emotion, you just continue with that. So that's a very good thing. But do you feel like it was easier to talk to your mom or instead of your dad?
I mean, I don't know if this is a brown thing or a male thing, right? But my mom and my dad, they both didn't really pay attention to my emotions, um,
Yeah.
like at any point throughout my whole life, really.
Mm.
If there was anything physical, then they would immediately rush me to the hospital, rush me to the clinics. Stuff like that.
Yeah, because I was gonna ask you, like, did you feel like you couldn't talk about your feelings the same way you could talk about your physical pain?
I could talk about it, it just wouldn't be heard. It would be useless to talk about it. So
Fair.
eventually, I just learned not to talk because there'd be no point in it.
So what have you done to get your emotions out? Like, how did your emotions get out before dealing with it as an adult? As a kid, how did you? Because obviously they're not gonna just stay there, right? They're gonna come out in some way. So how do you remember getting your emotions out?
Well, I mean, this isn't really like the best example, but uh, my dad is like a traditional brown male where he doesn't feel anything apart from anger, and because this is what I had to watch and learn from. I learned that as a teenager. That's when I kind of stopped crying because it got a bit too much in school. I would like cry at least once a year in up to year nine. At which point, I don't know, I just didn't feel like that was normal because no one else did it. I'm sure if
Yeah.
you go to a boys' school. Also, I went to a boys' school, so no girls cried around me either. So it
Um,
was like I didn't see any crying. So I was like, oh, this is bad. I should stop doing it. And at some point, I switched from sadness to anger, and I would just get excessively angry, like uncontrollably angry, as a
mm.
teenager. And this carried on until uni, at which point I realized like my anger comes from sadness.
Yeah, that's the thing, 'cause I think anger is an emotion that a lot of people don't understand, but sometimes when you get so, so sad, it comes out as anger. When you're
Yeah.
so, so frustrated, it comes out as anger. So a lot of the emotions that we don't deal with come out as anger, and I think that does it for men, like, when they're extremely sad or when they're frustrated with something, it comes out as anger because that is, like, we talked about, is the accepted thing. How did you change it around? Like, when did you
Well,
realize, "You know what? Maybe this is not how I should express my feelings. Maybe I should deal with it."
um, I was going through quite a tough time, early uni, and
Mm,
when I went back to India to chill with my cousins for a bit, because every summer we go back.
mm.
I was talking to one of my cousins, and I should probably clarify, I'm an only child, so this is the closest sibling experience that I have. So I'm
Yeah.
really close with my cousins. Um, but yeah, we would like talk into 2 or 3 a.m. Almost every day. And he was going through something tough as well. So when we were talking about this kind of stuff, that's when we kind of realized that we both are just angry at the world, angry at people, just
Mm.
so angry that we just didn't know what to do with it. So he kind of told me that like he's open to crying and stuff like that. And at the time, I was like, whoa. And it was almost like, even though I really wanted to cry, because I'm like at heart a crybaby, because that's what I did up to year 10.
Yeah.
Um, I kind of felt what a wuss or something like that. And then I was like, hang on, I'm just feeling that because I really want to do this, but I don't have the courage to, but he
Yeah.
does. So, hmm. And then I thought about it, and that kind of affected me. But more than that, movies and TV shows, like we're both influenced by a lot of movies and TV shows.
Mm.
And when you see a guy cry there, um, it doesn't have to be a death of a family member or something as extreme where
Yeah.
people cry in TV. Obviously, there's a lot of TV shows and movies that also propagate toxic masculinity,
Mm.
but quite a lot of them also show men crying. And that is also somewhere where I've sort of realized that this is something that can be socially acceptable,
Mm.
this kind of stuff. And yeah, that's what seeded.
Yeah, no, when you say that in movies, like, that you see men cry, I just thought about, like, in Tamil movies, in Kollywood. I like, any time that I feel like a man cries, he's either very drunk, and that is his excuse to cry. Like, he's never crying just to cry, he's crying over a girl, but he's crying because he's very drunk. Like, it's always an excuse to cry, and I like you said, you're not there are so many people so many men who cry. I think just making it a normal thing, I think you people will realize that what, everyone does this. And I think personally, I think I've seen more men cry than women working in my field. Do you talk about your emotions with your friends?
I've been trying to make more of a um, effort to talk about emotions with my guy friends. But
Mm,
I would say, as of one of my friends, I would talk to about emotions, and that was pretty recently. That was about 4 years or so. But no, less than that, more like 3 years. Um, but this is a friend who I've known since school, and we've been best friends for a really long time. So it
mm,
kind of took that level of closeness too.
yeah,
But beyond that, the last year or so, I've been trying and making more of an effort to talk about emotions with my guy friends because I just feel like why should it only be girls that get to talk about this stuff, you know? Like,
yeah, 100%. Yeah. No, I think that's very good. I think more men should take the step and just, talk about it because it's not mental health and emotions are not reserved for girls or women. It is
exactly.
for everyone. And I think that is important to remember. But what do you feel like men or boys can do to overcome the stigma on men's mental health?
I mean, I feel like a lot of people think the same way that I do, where they might
Mm,
want to cry or they might want to show emotion, but because they haven't been allowed to, they don't allow other people to either.
yeah.
And if a guy does this kind of stuff, he might be called gay, a wuss, whatever, this kind of
Mm,
stuff.
mm.
Um, so I mean, I would say getting over the stigma, but it's never as easy as that, is it?
No,
Um,
100%. Yeah. And if it was, we would have been, right?
exactly. I think the easiest thing is probably to cry in private. I think
Yeah.
that is good. You can keep up your social image of not crying, but then still cry in private, which means at least you get to like unbottle your emotions as a start. And then
Yeah.
if enough people do this, then when you talk to someone about this, then maybe they also go, "Hey, I do this too." And at
Yeah.
which point it becomes normalized. Even if you don't
Mm.
want to cry in front of other people, you can
Yeah.
at least have an outlet for your emotions.
Yeah. And I think it's important to call people out on when they use the terms like, man up or stop crying or saying, because I think we're saying it so much that we're not realizing what we're saying. So I think it's important to just check in with each other and be like, you know what, that's not okay to say. And just remind ourselves that, that is harmful. Telling a 6-year old boy that, men don't cry, or boys don't cry it's harmful. And I think we're just used to saying that, using the word gay, for example, as a curse word. We have another episode where we talk about this, but
Yeah, it's actually
even
quite
even
funny how we've come to use the word gay as
yeah,
almost everything but homosexual.
yeah, exactly. And I think we need to just be better at calling ourselves out and calling everyone around us out when we do these things. But what do you feel like could make it easier for boys and men to talk about mental health or to seek help?
I think one of the most important things is to have male role models who do this. So
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe our generation and the generation above is too far gone, and it's going to be too difficult to change. Well, definitely the generation above, I think, is too far gone.
As in
Maybe
they
I'll
have
go.
it yeah, I think it's in their because they grew up like that, right? So it's gonna if it
Yeah.
took them 10 years to learn something, it's gonna take them 10 years to unlearn something. So I fully agree that it's gonna take some time for them to realize that, emotions are okay amongst men as well. I think, like you said, it's important to be a good role model and to talk about this openly and that we to remind ourselves that illness is not it doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you less of a man. It actually makes you proactive and you're kind of taking initiate like you're working on yourself and self-improvement. And I think that's what people need to remember.
No, I 100% agree. I think the next generation definitely shouldn't be allowed to, feel that they aren't allowed to feel.
Yeah. Mm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I do think this problem shouldn't be carried forward. But for our generation, um, I don't really know. It has to be societal change, doesn't it?
Right? We can't expect everyone else to change when we you and so I know, for example, I'm calling myself out right now because I know
Mhm.
that I have said "man up" or "grow some balls." I have said that, and I have now been more mindful of what I say and when as in I've been more mindful of using words like that and what I'm saying because it is harmful. But I think saying it repeatedly, it kind of makes a big deal.
Speak it into existence.
Yeah.
You know, um, I think for one, if you're a guy, you should definitely talk to your friends about crying and stuff. Um, as you say, I am also somewhat of a hypocrite in that I can't cry in front of other people. It just
Yeah.
doesn't come out. It's just my head automatically bottles it up rather than
Mm.
actually letting it out. But I can cry in private. That is a skill I've mastered in my last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Um, but I think more than that, I think just if you're a guy, you should be able to talk to your friends at least about your guy
Yeah, no,
friends.
no, that's what I'm saying, like, I'm not saying that, after this episode, go and cry out in public. That's not the point. The point is to open up a dialogue. Like, just I'm trying to say that mental health and emotions are not reserved girls. It's not a girly thing to do. I honestly don't believe that men talk about their emotions the same way that women do.
Oh no, 100% they don't.
Yeah. But would you find it easier to talk to a girlfriend than a guy friend?
No,
No, okay.
no, I would feel embarrassed,
Yeah.
and I know in my past, um, a lot of girls don't really want to deal with the emotional turmoil that comes from a guy crying to you because when a girl
And
cries to
that's
you,
as well is where we have to be better. It's not just the guys who need to cry more or show emotions. We as women or on the other side receiving it need to be more accepting as well and change our attitudes. So it's good that you say that because I think it's a responsibility that lays within us as well.
I mean, I don't want to be attacked.
No. No, no, no. No, but I agree. Like a lot of us do. Sometimes,
I see where it comes from a bit. When you're a girl, you regularly let off the steam by crying, for example, if it's sadness. If you're a guy, you don't regularly let off your sad steam by crying. So when you do end up crying, it becomes a massive thing rather than more of a, something that you can deal with. So I can
yeah,
understand why it can be a lot of turmoil. But I think it's especially bad when a lot of girls or women say that it's okay to cry to your girlfriends and stuff like this,
yeah,
but then it ends up being a problem when you do. So I personally haven't had experience with this, but a lot of my close friends have,
yeah.
where if one of them start crying after they've drank a bit too much, then um, his friends get called and they get told to deal with the problem rather than not seeing it as a problem and just seeing it as something that it's just a bit of a vent.
Mm.
So yeah, I think it has to be a societal change where people just try to be that little bit better. And what I do see a lot of is guys blame girls. They say, oh, women are the ones who uphold these sort of values, so we don't have to do anything. And girls blame guys, where they say, oh, like our guy friends can come cry to us. It's their guy friends that they can't talk about emotions to. And sure, the mistake lies with both genders, but if you don't look at your own gender's mistakes, then you can't move forward. You can't make a
Yeah,
change
I
if you
don't
just
think
stand there pointing.
mm. No, I don't even think that it's like a gender thing. I think it's, you need to just start with yourself. It doesn't matter,
exactly.
like, So,
Yeah.
like, I can't expect anything from anyone unless I need to be the change, right? Trying some Gandhi here, but, like, just but, yeah. I think we could go on and on about this topic. I mean, there's a lot to talk about, so maybe we'll do a part 2 if you're up for it, but I usually end every episode with a question, and that is, what would you tell your younger self?
Um, I'd probably just tell my younger self to be more chill because more than just crying and stuff with if you're a guy, another part of toxic masculinity is that your value is tied, your worth is tied to what you achieve and achievements a lot more. And
Mm,
for me personally, it has always been about doing things and like, getting somewhere with anything I do rather than
mm,
just chilling. And that's
yeah.
been a lot of my life. So I would probably just tell myself to chill a tiny bit more.
Alright. Thank you so much for joining our episode, Ashish,
Cool. Thank you for
and
having
thank
me.
you no, thank you for sharing. I think what I would take from this episode would be that, that it's funny how the same emotion, like anger, is looked upon differently in women and men, and how and what we can do as individuals to change this toxic masculinity in our society. And hopefully, the next generations and this generation will have a different experience with this. And since we have come far, as in, I think we have come far. We are not where we used to be, and it's small steps, but yeah, hopefully you guys learned a thing or two as well, and we will catch you in the next episode.